Going for two, kickers are extra, I give them the boot. Ooh, going for two, sit back, relax while I grab me a brew. Ooh, now I'm reclining while putting my time and I'm ready to go. My spine is aligning and much my lineups, my bank account grow. I am so rich, but knowledge is all that I'm leaving it with. Ooh, listen to this, multiple options, how far can I get? Ooh, DFS Dynasty redraft tonight, I'm not finishing last. I'm finishing past any and all, I am looking to last. What else? This spot is popping and I am so locked in and only opening the door when it is opportunity knocking. And all of these spots keep on talking and talking. So what are we talking? What kind of alignment? And running it deep, even players forgotten or came from the bottom or hitting that top. And this spot is popping, yeah, this spot is popping. And woo! This is the armchair, yeah. Put up your arms, yeah. Sound the alarm, yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo!
What is going on, guys, and welcome to the Any Given Sunday Personal League Podcast. I am your host, of course, Jeff Lambert. Find me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. I'm here tonight with the panel that you see in front of you, and we are here to break down the Dynasty League of Any Given Sunday. Let's meet the panel here. Kyle making faces at me.
Silly Senra says hello.
There you go. First up, we got Shane Barrett. He is the host of Polly Pocket's Polly Pocket. I do it every time.
Gosh darn time.
Just blame me for throwing you off. I'm sure you would have done it right if I didn't distract you.
No, he wouldn't have.
At this point, I must be doing it on purpose. Polly's Playoff Tournament and podcast and contribute for RotoHeat.com. Find him on Twitter at FFShaneB. What's up, Shane?
What's up, Jeff? I'll forgive you for calling it Polly's Pocket for like the 8 billionth time. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's Friday night, and these are always fun. And I get to do it with Kyle. So
absolutely. Mr. Kyle, as we have already mentioned, Kyle Senra. He is, of course, host of a couple of shows on the GoingFor2 Live Podcast Network, the 2 Point Conversion. He's been hosting on Monday nights. Press Coverage Podcast he hosts. He's hosted some other shows. He joins Gladys a lot of times on the In No Particular Order podcast. He's kind of does a little bit of everything. And you can follow him on Twitter at Senra Says. What's up, Kyle?
Hi, everyone. It's the Scott Fishbowl time. This year's theme is, of course, movies. But maybe Shane for Polly's Playoff. Eventually you have themes, and Polly's Pocket can be a theme for 1 year, or at least a Polly's Pocket division, and you have to put Jeff in that one.
Oh, I 100% will do that to him.
But welcome the Any Given Sunday League. Thankfully, this league's open to doing our Friday schedules, even though it's Any Given Sunday. Eventually, they might force us to do it on a Sunday.
Yeah.
They keep coming back every year, so hopefully we give them the best quality PLP as PL possible.
I love it.
Okay. It wasn't so bad.
All right, so for those that are tuning in that are like, what in the hell is a Personal League podcast and what is this we're doing tonight? So we are going to do an entire 1 hour show dedicated to their league. We ranked the teams, the two guys you see in front of me and myself. We ranked them from 10 to 1, with 10 being the team we would least want to take over and 1 being the team we would most want to take over. It is not best and worst. It is just how we want to build our teams. If we were to take them over as an orphan, which team would we want to take over? So we'll go through the rankings tonight. 10 to 1, we'll count them down. Each of these guys was given a couple teams to break down, to be the expert of. They'll give some trade advice, talk about strengths and weaknesses, and just overall what they think about the team. I will promote the PLP, GoingFor2.com/PLP, but I will tell you we only have one date left. September 6th is the only date open that I have currently. So if you want to get a PLP, you need to do that as soon as possible, because then we do not do these during the season. There's too much going on. It won't be until next year that we get going. So if you're listening to this right now and you want a PLP, GoingFor2.com/PLP and book that last date.
Or you can sign up for Polly's Playoff. And
you could also do both.
Earn a chance to win a Personal League podcast for next year.
Absolutely, that is one of the prizes for Polly's Playoff, not Polly's Pocket.
A pocket prize, perhaps.
All right, let's go ahead and just jump right into these teams, guys.
Number 10.
The number 10 team. Let me pull up my spreadsheet here. was ranked as low as 10 and as high as 7, and it is wasted talent. And I believe he put in the chat that he was going for the back-to-back worst team on this podcast, and he won.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. He got the last team once again. Shane, this
that's
is
why he's rostering all those bad players at the bottom end.
Yeah.
Okay, now it makes sense. You almost had to be doing it on purpose.
All right, Shane, give us your breakdown here.
Yeah, so your starting lineup is really, really young, but I think relatively solid until we get to those flex positions. So Brock Purdy, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyron Williams, Xavier Worthy, Romeo Dobbs, Gabe Davis, Brock Bowers. I really like that as a core. And then Tua down there in your super flex position as well is, I think, solid. Will it win you the league this year? Probably not. But I think it may sneak in a game here or two. But Tyler Algier is stuck behind Bijan. Caden Otten is a solid backup tight end for Brock Bowers because Brock Bowers is going to be a stud. Don't let the Kyle Pitts detractors fool you. And then Jalen McMillan, I don't know. Just because he's stuck behind Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Trey Palmer, if you ask me. And then you do have my favorite player in the league right now, Baker Mayfield. So that's probably why you got a little bit of a bump. And that's really, you have draft capital, but it's all like third and fourth rounders. So if you can package a couple of those thirds and maybe Baker or Tua or something to kind of redistribute your team to add depth, because that's really where you lack is just any kind of depth outside of the quarterback position. And even that is a little more shallow than I initially remember. But there's some people on your bench that like you could even just go ahead and cut, like Elijah Dotson, cut him. Dalvin Cook, cut him. Robert Woods might be a cut candidate.
Irwin.
Yeah, Trenton Irwin, definitely a cut candidate.
Did you say Tyler Higbee?
No, I was actually about to say that Tyler Higbee's kind of sneaky, but a lot of people have focused on Colby Parkinson being brought into LA as like Parkinson is a sleeper tight end. With Higbee still there, I don't see why. Unless I'm completely forgetting that Higbee got severely injured at the end of the season.
You are forgetting that because in the playoff game, he like tore, I think, his ACL and his MCL. There is a very real chance Higbee doesn't play games. Okay. So my take on him is like, I'm just getting rid of him.
That's fair. Okay. That makes a lot more sense because I was like, why are people hyping up Colby Parkinson so much this offseason? Now it makes more sense. So that's...
You see, it didn't happen during the fantasy playoffs. It happened during the NFL playoffs, so we don't care as much.
That's fair. So
dude's 31. It's
yeah,
it might be over.
Yeah, it very well could be.
But now, the one thing I just want to ask, it seems like this team has like 5 extra players than everyone else. So are they already over the limit anyway, and they haven't like checked their team? Yeah. Feels like wasted time, wasted talent. But like they might already have to like automatically cut 5 players just to get to the spot, and then they want to make any.
Well, I can help you with that.
Yeah,
Dalvin
exactly.
Cook, Elijah Dotson,
yeah,
probably Xavier Hutchinson, Trenton Irwin. I would probably cut Juju Smith-Schuster at this point. Let's throw
Robert
Higbee
Woods,
in
you mentioned
there.
earlier. Tyquan Thornton.
Yep. I would hold on to Thornton just because I have no idea what's going to happen with the New England wide receiver room. But if he ends up being pushed down to 4th or 5th, then cut him too. Kadarius Toney can't catch a cold. Might as well cut him. Unless you get, and I don't think that you do, points for return yards, because I think I was talking with Mike Hicks that he is currently listed as the kick returner.
And there is no points for return yards. I'm looking at the scoring now. I don't see any points.
Yeah.
You could probably cut McCole Hardman as well.
Yep.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
So there's moves to make in terms of.
There's definitely moves to make, and I think if you were to, I know in waiver wire and dynasties never really great, obviously, because the rosters are so much deeper. But in a 10-team league, I'd imagine that there's some guys out there with better opportunities than the ones that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
Are they better players? Maybe not, but they have the unknown, where some of these know what they are. They've been in the NFL long enough. We know what they're going to get. Not much. I would take a chance on a third string rookie running back that's sitting on the waiver wire that may not see the field right away, but to have him on my roster as opposed to some of those guys we just mentioned would be a better bet, I think.
Shout out to Scott Connor at Charles Chill FFB on Twitter. NERB on a 53 is his thing, right? And this time of year, it's actually NERB on a 93. Anyone that's actually on a roster has a chance to make a roster, and then once the first 53 comes out, usually end of August, then you can judge, okay, who of these depth running backs should you go? But we just mentioned 6 wide receivers and 1 tight end to cut. And yeah, if you have to cut 5 players to get to that limit, that still leaves 2 extra spots you can use on running backs. That's the position where you really want the depth. When you're ever really going to start Trent Irwin, like at what point, like they're just kind of taking up roster spots. They're roster cloggers.
Agreed. Roster cloggers is the word that we use a lot here. All right, that's enough on team number 10. Let's get to number 9.
Number 9.
Number 9 team, a little bit more disparity here, as high as 6, as low as 10. Kyle, you were the highest, and this is your team here. Give us your thoughts.
Well, the first thing is, like, just looking at our aggregate rankings for the bottom 4 teams, they're all within 1 point of each other. So none of us had the same team ranked last. So Jamie said pick up Ryan Flournoy. And Jamie's probably looking on one of his tools or apps that'll let him actually look into the league and see who's available. So
yeah, absolutely. Jamie does that where he's looking at the league currently, and if Flournoy is out there, I would prefer Flournoy over all those guys that we just talked about.
Yeah. He might end up being a roster clogger receiver, but because he's a rookie, we don't know. He has a chance to potentially be more. So the upside shot. We'll die hard on that theory of running back depth. I certainly will. And look, the team we're talking about next is diehards. So there's a reason Shane ranked them 10. We may or may not get to that, and that isn't relevant really to the point. I love the top 2 quarterbacks, the QB duo starting on this team: Josh Allen, Jared Goff. Allen is one of the highest upside players in fantasy football. His rushing touchdown ability especially gives him just this unreal weekly ceiling. And Goff, especially if you know when to play him, right, Jeff? Home Goff. I think he's got a lot of, at the very least, dome games this year. So should be another great season for Goff and can complement well to Allen. Certainly when he's playing at home or playing in a dome, he has a fairly high floor. The ceiling might not be incredible. The receivers are fantastic, especially the top 3: Jefferson, Devontae Smith, Michael Pittman. I categorize the next 3: Stephon Diggs, Rashee Rice, Jerry Jeudy is great, and then it drops off from there, and that's where we might get into the roster clogger territory. Now, unlike maybe some other teams, they don't have a ton of those roster cloggers. Jacob Cowing, Bub Means, Zay Jones. There's, I think, enough upside on them that you can justify holding them. To me, it's too many tight ends, if anything. George Kittle, Hunter Henry, Pat Freiermuth, Jatavian Sanders. Now, none of those guys are bad enough to cut, but it feels like, Kittle's a guy you kind of just have to play every week. If you're going to roster George Kittle, you accept that he is going to bust some weeks. There are weeks where he's going to go 1 for 18. And that's all he's going to get you. But when he gets those 3 touchdown games, it's usually for 150 yards. Just kind of has this, kind of like Josh Allen, the highest upside at his position on a week-to-week basis. So this is a lineup that's going to be very boom or bust, at least with certain players. And maybe the best thing to do otherwise is complement with high floor players, like a Jefferson, like a Pittman. So there's good parts to the build in that regard. But again, I still think there's too many tight ends. Because if you don't have Kittle, you don't have to play a tight end, right? The one caveat of this league is you don't actually have to start any tight ends. And there's no tight end premium. So there's never really an incentive to play a tight end unless there's a specific reason. What's the week where you decide to play Hunter Henry? When does that actually happen? Typically, if there's enough running backs that are going and looking like they're going to get opportunities, you'd rather just stick with them. And you're already, again, filling potentially 6 of those starting spots with wide receivers. Their upside. If Rashee Rice is suspended, obviously that's the game he's not playing. Running backs are pretty good too, and I would say decent depth. But I think as opposed to having 4 tight ends, maybe have 2, and that's 2 extra roster spots on running backs. Again, get that running back depth because those are the players that where something could happen on a week-to-week basis, and it could be just like something where if a player is going to start and you know in advance, you know when to play them. With some of those tight ends, it's just gonna be really tough to determine when. So if someone likes tight ends, maybe you can try and trade one away. But yeah, it's like a guy like Hunter Henry, you're not really gonna cut him. Jatavian Sanders, you just drafted him. Like, so you put yourself in some bad situations. And so I like certain aspects of the team, but other aspects not so much. They were a fairly tough one to rank. Pretty easy for Shane though.
Yeah, Shane, go ahead and give him your reason for ranking him at 10 so we can get that out the way.
You have Deshaun Watson, and he's a terrible person. That is why you were 10. But looking at your team, I don't know if I really would have ranked you 10, but that's what gave you the bump. I'm very surprised that Kyle liked you as much as he did because Kyle loves running backs more than I do. And I don't like with
I get blinded by Bijan too. So it's like this team has Bijan.
Do they have Bijan?
No,
they have Brian Robinson.
Oh, that's why I'm so blinded by Bijan. That's where I thought. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
and
that's kind of why, like, I'm surprised because on our spreadsheet that we're looking at, Tyjae and Brian Robinson are in the starting spot, and then Aaron Jones is in a flex with Eckler on the bench. Like, yeah, you've got decent depth with a bunch of guys, but my biggest concern is I don't know if you truly have like that RB1 guy that is going to consistently get you RB1 points from the running back position. I love Aaron Jones. Don't get me wrong there, Kyle, but he has been sporadic with one, his playing time in general, and two, when he actually goes off. Now, when he goes off, it's great. It's like 50 points and you're like, oh my God, I'm like, you're not touching me this week, but he's on a new team that has a bunch of weapons in the passing game where you can also use Aaron Jones. So I'm cautious about Jones right now. And same thing with Eckler. Like, he's on a completely new team. You actually have both of the Commanders running backs. So you've kind of got to figure out how that backfield is going to play out. And are you playing both of them each week? Or are you leaning one way depending on who their matchup is that week? So those are probably some reasons that I would have ranked them a little bit lower. Maybe not necessarily 10, but yeah, I hate Deshaun Watson. So that's why you got 10. Sorry.
Yeah, so I had him at 8, and my thing is, so looking at this roster is kind of how I would build my dynasty league. You know, you got the top 10 quarterbacks, you got some young, stud receivers, and usually I'm like a punt running back until I'm ready to compete, ready to contend for a title, which is essentially what they're doing with the older running backs. My issue with it is I think they waited a little too long to move some of these older pieces like the Austin Eckler. Mm-hmm. I don't think he recoups any of his value. Aaron Jones is iffy. How's he going to...
Diggs.
Yeah, Diggs. I think some of these guys, we could have moved them maybe a year earlier. And maybe you still can. Maybe the season starts and Eckler comes out like gangbusters and you could try to move him at that point. But I think you may have waited just a little bit too long to move some of your older pieces. And like Kyle mentioned, Kittle, having Kittle in a flex position when you don't have to start a tight end, Kittle is great, but he's going to have, 3, 4, 5 games in a row sometimes where he's not going to do a whole lot because he's asked to block too much. He'll have those huge explosion games, but when you don't have to start a tight end, it sort of makes that positional advantage go away. I would much prefer to have a guy with consistent points than a guy that's going to win me 2 or 3 weeks a season and basically be a dud the rest of the time. So overall, the team is pretty solid, and this is a 10-team league. So obviously, as Kyle mentioned, these are very, very close together. In fact, the number 9 team and the number 8 team, in our consensus ranking, were actually both ranked at number 8. But because this one had a little bit of a higher rank, I put them at the 8th team had a little bit of a higher overall rank. I put them one spot higher. Overall, I think this team has some potential, but it does need some work for sure.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out why did I put them 6, and ultimately I'm looking at the team that I had. Like
it's because you thought it was Bijan Robinson and not Brian Robinson.
That's probably it. And I think I'm looking at the team that I have ranked 7th, and they may or may not have Bijan, but they also don't have their first in 2025, and whereas Die Hard still does. Yeah. Now they don't have any other 2025 picks, so it'll actually be pretty tough to want to move that. But still, the full complement of the future years picks. I guess that was the one thing to forget to mention about wasted talent. Not only is there a lot of cloggers and there's certain aspects of the
They
lineup
only
we
have
don't
third and
like.
fourths in 25.
Exactly. They don't even have their first, and it's one of the weaker rosters. That's why that was.
Yep. That's tough.
I didn't even rank them 10. Wow. I think I know why I ranked one team 10. We'll get to them in a second. But yeah, diehards, the fact that they still have all their first, and to your point, Jeff, about the 10-team league, that also makes like the floor of a first round pick value. It can't be worse than 110, right? So like in a 16-team league, you might value a random first less because there's a chance that could be the 116. So.
Right.
With it being a 10-team league, the first are always going to have a certain floor of value. And so I think maybe that's what ultimately made the difference. I put them as high as I did at 6 was, okay, they still had all their first.
Fair enough. All right, let's get to team number 8.
Number 8.
Number 18. This one's got a pretty big disparity, ranked as low as 10 and as high as 5. It is Sunken Treasure. And Shane, this is your squad here.
Okay. I just came to the realization, like literally minutes ago, that Sunken Treasure has, let me count them for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tight ends. What the fuck are you doing in a league that you don't have to start a tight end with 6 tight ends?
This is why I ranked them 10.
Do you have a fetish that we need to talk about? Because I am, wow.
And
now some of them are good, like Kincaid and McBride. Like those are good
They're
guys.
solid, yeah. But I'm
then,
like, you guys pointed it out, and I was looking at them to prep for what I was getting ready to say, and I was like, wait, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Holy crap! Why? Okay, so besides that, this team is super young, and I think Jeff and I talked a little bit pre-show. That's why he had them ranked so high. And I'm totally fine with that, especially from a dynasty perspective. I think the reason that I rank them lower is because after the starting lineup, your depth sucks. And I know it's a 10-team league, which to me really means your depth shouldn't be as bad as it is, but your whole team is super young except for 3 players, maybe 4 players. Matthew Stafford, Michael Thomas, Brandon Cooks, and Dallas Goedert. Like, other than that, I don't think you have a player older than maybe 25. I mean, Spencer Rattler might be 30 because he's been in college football for that long. But it's a super fun, super young roster, and you do still have you even have an extra third. But I think the reason I ranked them low is because, like, yes, taking this team over would be a ton of fun just because of the youth and the trajectory that you do have going forward. But I think for this year, it could suck. And I am not the biggest JJ McCarthy guy. So if he busts, like, then your QB2, I mean, I kind of have him as your QB3. Your QB2 Stafford, he's 30 something years old at this point. He's approaching the end of his career. He doesn't really fit on your team right now. So he'd probably be someone that I'd be looking to move to try and even find somebody with a little bit more upside at the quarterback position, just because of how young your team is. But I mean, you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., so and Jaden Daniels, your future is set. But those are my thoughts on this.
3 of the top 4 rookies.
Yeah.
Which is great, but then Trey Benson is the RB1. And the problem is this team seems so young that you don't really want to go spend the capital that they have on getting a running back right now. You feel like you're punting for a year or two. So I guess the first thing to do, like you said, actually it's a smart thing. Sell Stafford for a younger quarterback. Someone, when this team's contention window opens in like 3 years, a quarterback that might not be on the verge of retiring, someone that you're going to have some.
So do you want to know the quarterback that I thought of immediately when I said that?
I've got a name too. Yeah, I'm curious to hear yours.
Mine was Bryce Young.
Okay.
I feel
mine
like
was someone who seems like he's just as hated as Bryce Young, but that actually makes even more sense.
Yeah, I like a trade of Stafford for Bryce Young. I don't know if you could do it straight up. Depends just because of Stafford's age and obviously Bryce is only being in year 2. But that was kind of my first thought was make a trade for Bryce Young. I think he fits with this team really well. Much better than Stafford. And then you've got 3 young QBs who you can kind of rotate in and out as you see fit.
Yeah. And I think keep going on that trend of selling older players. I think Brandon Cooks is someone you probably really want to
Absolutely.
sell because they will be productive and maybe even counterproductive in a sense to a rebuild type of team. Because the starting lineup doesn't look great. You talked about depth. I already think you get to some of the back end starters, and I've got serious questions.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lack of a lot on this team, and it seems like there's enough young pieces, but there's also some guys pulling in a different direction that you may want to address and get rid of. Goddard could, like you said, could be added. Maybe even Schultz too. Can you try and find a way to sell both tight ends? Sell Brandon Cook, sell Matthew Stafford. Maybe it might have to be different types of trades. Are you throwing picks onto them to get better picks, like throw a third to get a second? Might be ways
Yes,
to go about it.
this team for me is the epitome of why we start the show and say we rank these based on teams we would like to take over. So I had this team ranked at 5. Kyle had them ranked at 10. Shane had them ranked at 9. So for me, if I'm taking this team over, I have a blank slate, so to speak. I have all these young guys. I looked at this roster. You got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, Trey Benson. All guys that are top this year. You got Dalton Kincaid. You got Trey McBride. But then moving those older guys at the right time, right? Like not now, because right now their value is probably low because they're with these older, guys like the Brandon Cooks and the TJ Hawkinsons, and TJ Hawkinson may not start the season, and the best time to trade him is probably right before he comes back. When his value, everybody's starting to talk him up. He's looking good in practice. I'm trying to move him during the season at some point. Dalton Schultz, another guy we mentioned could be traded. Moving these pieces during the season. Matthew Stafford, I think, is a big chip that once you get to the contender stage where you're starting to see the separation in teams during the season, look at the other rosters and who needs a quarterback, because Matthew Stafford is the perfect piece to move. But this to me would be a lot of fun, having all these rookies, to see all these guys, basically owning these guys from the beginning of their careers and seeing them grow on your roster would be fun to me. That's something that I've never had a team that had this many rookies on it before. None of my startups do I build that way, and even when I run teams, I don't think I've ever had that many rookie picks that I would have a whole entire team full of first and second year players essentially.
Oh, I've got one. It's a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's why I have him at 5. Right, I couldn't put him in the top 4 because I think the top 4 are pretty much legit top 4.
Yeah.
But at 5, to have fun with this roster, I would love to do that.
In these longer term rebuilds, there's no pressure on scoring points and the weekly stress of fantasy football. If someone on your team scores a lot of points, okay, that's great value, I can sell. And I do wonder, to me, TJ Hawkinson almost seems like the perfect player to hold on this team. If you are thinking longer term rebuild and you want to get that early first next year, he's not going to be someone scoring you points and necessarily hurting you. So I'd almost look to sell one of Kincaid or McBride, sell on that top 5 dynasty tight end value right now. Especially, I think McBride would be the one I'd want to sell. I'm a little lower on McBride redraft than most. I think I've got him at redraft tight end 8. And so for a lot of these other elite tight ends, they're all in the top 5, except him. So he's the one that I kind of want to take advantage of the top 5 dynasty price. But also because they have Marvin Harrison on this team, do you really want both? At least with Hawkinson, yes, you have Addison, but you also have J.J. McCarthy. You're trying to set up that long-term stack without Jefferson, naturally, of course. But with McBride and Harrison on the same team, I don't know if there's incentive to go out and buy Kyler Murray. I feel like, when we're talking about selling on Stafford, get younger, Murray's so expensive that you're having to now dip into the first, which I don't think we want to do with this team.
Yep. Agreed 100%. All right, let's get to number 7.
Number 7.
Number 7 team ranked as high as 6, as low as 9. It is Sham Squad, and Sham Squad is Kyle's squad to talk about. So Kyle, take it away.
Senra says Sham Squad sweet. Wow, I messed that up. Damn it, that was not sweet at all. So some sweet pieces on the team, though. I gotta say, having Dak, always feel like he's undervalued in Dynasty, and he's constantly producing. It's going to be the case for several more years. So just keep riding Dak. QB2 behind Dak, though, it's funny because it's 2 QBs in risky for opposite reasons. You got Russell Wilson, risk of the age, like how much longer is he going to go? How many more chances is he going to get? Could he be benched for Justin Fields? How much of the season is he going to play? I guess you have the same question with Drake May. How much of the season is he going to play because he's a young rookie? We really don't know anything at this point. When will he take over for Jacoby Brissett? So there's a chance that you might only have Dak for a lot of these weeks. So there's that. That's one aspect why I had diehards ahead of them. Sorry, Shane, for asking for reasoning. To be fair, these last three teams are ranked within 0.3 point of each other in terms of the average ranking. So this is kind of almost a little tier here. This kind of ends that tier. So I guess can you trade either Wilson or May to upgrade? Probably have to add something to that. This team has a full complement of picks. I don't know if you necessarily want to be using the 25 first, but can you add other pieces? I mean, okay, Shane, just now that we're thinking about this, just the last team talking about sunken treasure, they add another rookie quarterback. Do they sell Stafford to get Drake May?
I'd be fine with that.
Does Sham Squad feel that's three older quarterbacks, but do you feel more like if you want to go for it, you have the QBs to at least give you the points to
yeah, I mean, I think that kind of depends on the direction that Sham Squad wants to go, because my theory in Dynasty is you either want to be at the top or be at the bottom. You don't want to be stuck in the middle unless you have a direction. And with Sham Squad being 7, that's kind of right there in the middle. So you need to make that decision. Are you going to try and go for broke and go for the top? Or are you going to start selling pieces off to start tanking? If you go for broke, Stafford's a good piece for that over like a Drake May or a Russell Wilson, because Stafford isn't losing his job unless he's injured.
Yep. And if you don't sell the first to try and make that happen, that still gives future first to you can then use them to trade for quarterbacks or potentially draft them as well. So like you still give yourself that flexibility. You might not know who your long-term QBs are going to be, but you still have the ammunition to go get them when you figure out who you want it to be. So Stafford might not be optimal. The other thing too is you try and go get Justin Fields, and then at least that way you guarantee yourself a Steelers starter.
I mean, now would be the time to do it.
I feel like that could be, and that might be something where you don't even have to necessarily give up a quarterback. Although I think the team with Fields might need that extra QB. So are you willing to just give up Drake May? And probably at you're getting value added on top. Like sell Drake May for Justin Fields plus. And then maybe that plus comes in the form of starter. Maybe that just comes in the form of extra pick ammunition. And again, that'll allow for bigger moves later on. Sell for get Justin Fields in the second for Drake May. I don't know if that makes sense. But then can you then package like 2 or 3 seconds to go buy another quarterback afterwards? And then now you've got that third QB, and then you have the 2 Steelers locked in. Yes, you're using up 2 roster spots for 1 starter in that sense. But I mean, I guess this team might also have to cut down, or maybe not. Just looking at total number of roster players. But like at the back end of the wide receiver room, then we start talking about roster cloggers again, like Greg Dortch and Tutu Atwell. So
don't sleep on Greg Dortch.
Everyone's still loving some Greg Dortch.
Don't sleep on Greg Dortch.
I don't know. I think Zay Jones is coming in there to take
no
targets.
way.
He's had 100 target seasons on 2 different teams before.
Yeah,
so I get the sense that Michael Wilson, Zay Jones, like those are going to be like the secondary weapons.
I do keep forgetting Michael Wilson exists, but he also, to me at this point, feels like that kind of just jump ball kind of guy for them.
Yeah, I'm not overly excited about Michael Wilson, but all to say, like, I think that this team can afford to spend maybe 1 less roster spot on receiver and an extra spot on QB.
Sure.
You could justify, again, holding both Steelers quarterbacks. That gives an idea there. Good running back depth for this team. Not like an elite starter, but Kenneth Walker, James Cook. I have them both, I think, as top 15 dynasty running backs.
I think Alvin they can get there.
For a full PPR league, Alvin Kamara is great. So you've got like your productive RB1. There's no probably real wide receiver 1, but again, enough wide receiver 2 options to kind of you almost build like the Packers. You don't need that elite wide receiver 1. So you can still have the impactful lineup. Only 2 spots on tight ends and it's 2 pretty good tight ends with Evan Ingram, David Njoku. You consider them top 12. So if you're going to spend any roster spots on tight ends, may as well be top 12 guys.
Yep.
Still might even argue it's still too many, but at least these are acceptable tight ends. So I like the build enough. It feels like you want to use the picks for something, but then to Shane's point, the balance of do you really want to sell picks or do you want to hold picks for another year and see next year if the retool can lead to better results. So I think quarterback's really the first spot to look at.
Yeah, I had this team ranked at 9, and looking at it, I probably should have had it a couple spots higher because it is a pretty solid squad, like you mentioned. All those. There's no standout like stud. Your best receiver is probably Drake London, who will think he can be a stud, but hasn't proven it yet in the NFL. Your top running backs, Kenneth Walker. Dak Prescott had, I think Ryan said it last night or Wednesday night on our show, that Dak Prescott had the quietest QB3 season ever. People don't realize he was QB3 this past year. I think he had 30 plus touchdowns and whatever. And but even he's not one of those exciting quarterbacks that you hope to have on your roster. So it's a boring roster in the sense that there's no standout, but at the same time, every position there, except for maybe Drake May / Russell Wilson at quarterback, is the only weak spot in the starting lineup. And you mentioned the depth at running back, a couple guys on this bench. I really like the rookie Tyrone Tracy. I think he's going to have a chance to do something in New York. J.K. Dobbins, what's he going to be like, post-injury? But there's an opportunity there for him. Jerome Ford, is Nick Chubb going to be fully healthy? Chase Brown, how's that shake out? But you also have, doesn't he also have Zach Moss as well? So he has both Cincinnati running backs. So he has the starter, essentially, one of those two starters. So, yeah, the depth is definitely there as well. So,
and to your point with Ford, he complements well with Jonathan Brooks. It's two different teams, but the same situation. We expect Ford to get more work early in the season because of Nick Chubb's injury, and then Jonathan Brooks expected to get work later in the season as he recovers from his own injury. So maybe as Jerome Ford starts to lose touches, that's when you can start playing Jonathan Brooks. So there's
good point.
Like complementary things to the lineup as well.
All right, let's get to number 6.
Number 6.
So Kyle kind of mentioned the tier break there. So those 4 teams that we just did, 7 through 10, were separated by 1 point. Now the jump from the 7 team to the 6 team is separated by 2 full points. So there is definitely a tier break from those bottom 4 until the top 6. This team is ranked as high as 3 and as low as 7. And it is, I don't even know how to pronounce that. Shane, you mentioned it before.
It's Iolytics, and I freaking love that. That's super clever.
I love it. So yeah, this is your team, Shane. So give us your breakdown.
Here we go. I've been waiting for this one. You're sandbagging, sir. Not only do you have a really solid starting lineup with Jalen Hurts, Bijan Robinson, learn how to read, Kyle, Jonathan Taylor, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Zay Flowers, George Pickens. I'm going off the spreadsheet, not what's on the screen, so I apologize if it's different. Rashad White, Kyle Pitts, Jaden Reed, and Kirk Cousins. That's freaking solid. Then from a backup quarterback standpoint, let's say Kirky isn't fully healthy. You have Michael Penix as well, and you still somehow have Desmond Ridder on your roster. I'll pray for you because that one that hurts from personal experience. Then you've got Najee and Jalen, so you have both the Steelers running backs. Both of them are flex worthy in my opinion at the very least. You've got DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp, Josh Palmer, Christian Watson, and DeMario Douglas, all on your bench. So that is why I had you as high as I did, because your depth is, I think, close enough to the guys that I had at 1 and 2, that you should be in contention pretty easily this year. I think the biggest concern is easily that second quarterback position, but I think you've got it solidified enough with having both the Atlanta quarterbacks. That'd be the one area that I'd probably target, is go find a true third quarterback that can kind of supplement you for bye weeks or if Kirk Cousins is not fully healthy. Because other than that, your depth to me, maybe running back is a little light, but I mean, you have 3 in your starting lineup that I think all finished at least top 15. I can't remember where Rashad White finished, but he was sneaky good all last year. This team to me was really, really solid. and I had them ranked 3 because of it.
Yeah, again, looking at this roster, I'm like, what was I looking at? Because you're mentioning those guys. It's
It's
a team
the
league.
spreadsheet can throw you off sometimes, man.
Yeah.
Like, because that's like I was looking at it and I was like, okay, this is a really good starting lineup. And then I kept scrolling. I was like, holy crap, you have a ton of depth on this team.
Yeah, the depth.
And I was also first to finish our rankings for the first time ever. So,
Yeah, congrats. I saw that. I think so. My thing, Ialytics and Diehards. That was what I was really like debating on. I put Diehard 6, Ialytics 7. And honestly, if I switched the rankings, they would still be ranked at their current spot. So like that change didn't really affect where they were placed. Diehards would still have been 9th in our rankings, and Ialytics would still be here at 6. They might be just a little bit closer to 5, but I think part of it was the QB2 issue, like depth at every position except quarterback. And if one thing happens at quarterback, it kind of almost sinks the season. Like if Jalen Hurts gets hurt,
then you're
you
in
don't
trouble.
really have. You've got Cousins / Penix, which gives you kind of a safety. But what kind of quarterback shape is that? Like what kind of upside does that really give you? The unfortunate thing is this team doesn't really have picks over the next couple of years to actually address that. Like what's the 27 first going to get you? What's the best?
Cam Coleman, wide receiver out of Auburn.
But like all to say, like who wants to give up a quarterback for a 27 first right now? Like what's that actually going to give you? 26 second, the 25 third. Like there's like it feels like it's easy, obvious. All you've got to do is get that third quarterback in there, and then that gives you bye week covering. Also allows you to, if Cousins appears to be in a bad matchup, that maybe lets you flip out of that. You're never going to bench Jalen Hurts. He's got too much upside on any given week. But how do you get that quarterback though? And maybe I think there's enough young receivers that are almost as liquid as picks to where if you could sell one and just get picks right now, and that's how you get the quarterback, or just straight up sell some of these receivers for a quarterback. And I guess that was, I think the lack of picks was what made me move them down a bit, down to 7. At least that was for me. I don't know if that was the same for you, Jeff.
Let me ask you, Kyle, if you're trying to make a trade for a quarterback, could you package Kirk Cousins and Penix to try to move, somebody that maybe is contending but doesn't want to also get older, but they get the Penix pick as well as getting Kirk Cousins where they don't lose too much, and then getting a QB2? Now you're still in the same predicament where if Hurts gets hurt, you only have one quarterback, but maybe he can be a better quarterback too for you.
I guess if the idea is you're not like super tearing up on Kirk, like you're saying, okay, I'm selling you Penix and Kirk for someone comparable to Kirk that way. And then that's probably how you get a second piece added. And maybe that's the ammunition that you can use. If you get a 25 second, like that's better. Maybe you could use the 25 second and the 26 second together. And that's how you buy a quarterback.
Right.
Hold on. I have an idea. Okay. You need to make 2 trades. Your first trade needs to be with All About TDs, and you need to go get Geno Smith. Send him one of your old wide receivers, because that was what I'm. We'll get to this later, but he needs help. And then with Meadowlands, go get Sam Howell. So then you have that third QB room locked up in a way that if Sam Howell becomes a starter, you've got it locked in. You've still got Penix and Cousins, and then obviously you've still got Jalen. So it would suck to roster, 5 quarterbacks for essentially 2 roster spots, but that would be a way that I think you could kind of use some of the depth that you have to strengthen the overall picture of your roster.
I was going to say try and sell Desmond Ridder to the Kyler Murray manager, but I mean, that team's already rostering enough quarterbacks. Like,
yeah.
Do they really want to add Ridder to that? And they've already got enough good quarterbacks too. Like they probably already have too many quarterbacks. There's like 1 or 2 they maybe shouldn't already be rostering. So you don't necessarily want to add Ridder to that mess. You've got a limited team amount of spots that you can spend on a QB. So if you're going to do that, you're probably cutting Desmond Ridder, to be honest.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that if that's what it takes to go get Geno, go get Sam Howell. Like right now, do you think you could get Sam Howell for that 26 second?
Easily.
I'm kind of thinking so too. Do you think you get him for the 25 third?
Yeah, I would do it. Either, because I think either way, that's a fair deal. Like if you
can start with that and see like what the Sam Howell current manager says, but like that could be easily attainable. And that way you figure, okay, how do you get Geno? It's through a wide receiver, like you said.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to hang on to Lockett, but he probably has less value than some of those other guys, older guys like Mike Evans or Cooper Kupp. Like those
Yeah.
are the ones that are older that people want that you can actually get value from.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to team number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5, we all kind of had in the same little cluster here. As high as 4, as low as 6. It is KCat 111. Is there 3 1s or is there 4 1s?
1,111.
1,111. It is your team, Kyle. Break it down.
Well, and that's a really good point about clustered together. This range of team ranked 3 through 6 is separated by 1.3 points or ranking spots
Right.
for the average. So like 3 through 6 is all close together, and it's two teams that are very different. Like you've got like Analytics, like the difference between number 3 spot and number 7, and yet then you get to KCat here, and we're all either 4, 5, or 6. So it's all we there's going to be 2 of these teams kind of paired together next to each other. So I kind of find that interesting that in this range there's 2 teams that all of us believe in, and then there's 2 teams that some of us do and the others don't, and they're very polarizing. So yes, with KCat, Joe Burrow. I mean, that's great. I mean, I still consider him a top 5 dynasty quarterback, and so any piece that has that is great. Oh, look, we have the Justin Fields team now, and it means they don't have a solid QB2 because Derek Carr, Justin Fields, Drew Lock. So right off the bat, the thinking is, okay, if this team can compete, are they a team that's going to be aggressive and go out and get quarterbacks? And I did rank them. I mean, I ranked them 5th, so right in the middle. And I think part of it is they do have the full complement of picks. So, full complement of picks. So any type of holes in the roster, they've got the ammunition to go fill and buy players. Potentially the RB1 overall with Breece Hall. And Travis Etienne's fantastic. The running back depth really dries up quickly. I count only 6 total roster spots used on a running back. And Foss, I know this will pain you. It pains me almost as much. But like, I don't count Cam Akers as a roster spot on a running back. That's
Okay,
he's
I was
not
gonna
on
say,
an
'cause
NFL roster spot. So the NFL isn't counted.
7.
There are 7, but one of them's Cam Akers, so you almost just ignore that, and there's really only 6.
That's
And like one of them's Alexander Madison, so like that's not very good. So yeah, Breece Hall's amazing, but running back depth is needed, quarterback depth is needed. Man, the rest of the team is pretty great though. I mean, if you're gonna have tight ends, again, may as well have a Mark Andrews. Cole Kmet might be a little too far there, but yeah, Jake Ferguson, Mark Andrews. Ferguson's just so safe that he almost is. If you need consistency in your lineup, he's probably great for that in terms of just getting catches. And with enough, I guess the lack of enough depth at other positions that might come in handy. Waddle, Olave, Collins, 3 great ones. And then you got 3 sort of potentially productive, mostly still young players, Jacoby Myers, Dotson, Downs. So there's like 6 good wide receivers, and yet, again, you only have 6 total running backs. So there's 13 total wide receivers. So after those top 6, there's a lot of them like you really don't need. Like there's a few rookies here that I guess you might have just drafted. Do you already want to cut them? You might have to. Again, I'd cut Cam Akers for anyone that's actually on an NFL roster.
Yep.
Like the thing with Johnny Wilson, it's never a good sign for a player when people they come into the league and they're already talking, oh, they need to change position. Like he's a wide receiver and everyone says he needs to change to tight end. That's already a bad sign to like, okay, he's probably not going to make a roster. He's not going to be a very solid NFL. I think you can be fine to cut Johnny Wilson. I'd much rather roster again that's on an NFL roster. Cordelius Johnson, I suppose, it's the Chargers offense. Like, what a great passing player to be it with, but again, like I don't know that there's much upside there. So there's a couple like cut Akers, cut Wilson, maybe even cut Johnson and add 3 running backs. And
I would even consider cutting DJ Chark.
Yeah, I guess with the other 6 guys already ahead of him.
Yeah.
When do you ever really start him?
Yeah.
I think he could have a good season with the Chargers, so I'm a little hesitant, but
if it came down to, I don't know, he'd be one I'd consider. I don't know if he'd be an immediate cut, but he'd be one I'd consider.
So I think again, I don't think they need to go spend draft picks on running backs. Like you could pick up depths or make trades and get like cheaper running backs thrown in. It really does feel like spend the draft capital towards quarterback. Get that truly solid QB2 because I don't really want Derek Carr as a QB2. Like having to rely on him in your lineup every week.
Yep.
You want an upgrade there. So maybe even like is that what it takes? Like trade, add picks to Carr, or again we've already talked about maybe trading away Justin Fields. Like I think there might be moves to be made, or just straight up go buy quarterbacks. But I think that's where KCAT needs to focus. All 1,111 of their next moves are all on quarterback.
Yeah, so I had this team of the three of us. I had it ranked the lowest. I had it at 6, and it comes down really to the bottom of that starting lineup. In a league where you don't have to start a tight end, the fact that you are being almost forced to start 2 of them because they are your best players, to start, makes me a little nervous. So when you think you got Jake Ferguson as a starter, Jacoby Myers as a starter, and Derek Carr is a starter, that makes me a little bit nervous. That means that your roster is not deep enough to really start a full complement of top flight fantasy players, which is why I ranked them the lowest. Now I still had them higher than some of the lower teams because obviously they had some dead spots. These guys are still startable. I just don't like in a league where I don't have to start tight end, and the fact that I'm almost being forced to start 2 of them, even if they are Mark Andrews and Jake Ferguson, which are two good tight ends. I'm still starting 2 tight ends in this sense, and it's not tight end premium, so I'd rather not have to do that. So that's why I had this one at 6. Still a decent roster overall. You mentioned, Breece Hall could be the number 1 running back this year. I love a Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle. I love Nico Collins. So a very solid roster overall. Shane, you had him actually the highest out of the 3 of us. What did you like about this roster the most?
Yeah. Before I get to that, Jamie brings up a good point in the chat about Chark being more of a best ball player. I think what probably infatuated me with this team was the RB duo, as well as those 3 wide receivers of Olave, Waddle, and Collins. With Breece, I mean, heck, I'll throw Burrow in this. With Burrow, Breece and ETN, and Mark Andrews, that to me gives you 3 shots at having a number 1 overall position or number 1 overall player at those positions. And I think that's probably what intrigued me the most. Looking at it again, 4 might have been a little high. But they do honestly, they just have some of my favorite players. Like I love Jahan Dotson. I love Josh Jones, love Cole Kmet. Probably, and I think what really threw me off as a whole, like looking back at it now with this league, is not realizing that you did not have to start a tight end.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I think if I had known that, it might have changed a couple of rankings, and this probably would have been one of them.
Fair enough.
Always check the scoring settings, folks.
Well, but that wasn't in the scoring settings, was it?
Well, but if you look on the spreadsheet, the position, you'll see.
Oh,
that
I see it now. Yeah.
It's flex, and then wide receiver / tight end flex.
Yeah, that's definitely a trademark of the guy who got this POP. The guy who paid for it actually is a trademark of his league.
He makes a god strike against tight ends and say you're not needed.
Yeah, doesn't like tight ends. I don't know why. All right, let's get to team number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4 team has probably the largest disparity of all of these. It is ranked as high as 3 and as low as 8. It is Team Limited. And Shane, this is your team. Give us your thoughts here.
Sorry, Shane, but to answer Brian's question, we figured it out. Who doesn't have the tight end finish? God strike, clearly.
Yeah. Nice callback there. Okay, so Team Limited. I don't know where to start with this one.
There's limited ways you can start, Shane. So
I'm going to start with the running backs. I love Nicholas J. Chubb. He's one of the best running backs in the league when healthy, and that's the biggest question mark with him this year is he going to be healthy? Devin Singletary had a great year in Houston. Is a giant question mark going to New York, especially with new coaching staff that he's getting adjusted to. Tyrone Tracy being there, there's just a lot of question mark. And I think that's probably what caused me to rank them so low is the lack of what I see as running back depth. We've mentioned a couple times that 1, this is a 10-team league, and 2, we rank them how we would want to take them over. This team got pushed down because of that kind of 10-team factor. and it happened to this team and one other team. I can't remember which one. Where it was like, I actually really still like this team, but they like someone's got to be ranked at some point, and this team just ended up being pushed down to 8. The wide receiver core is super young and really intriguing with Rome Odunze. Like, you're going to have to kind of buy into that sunk cost. You've already probably done that, at least to some extent, with JSN right there. I'm a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. There's like 3 of us, so I loved the Brian Thomas Jr. roster spot. Terry McLaurin is just Mr. 1,000 yards, and nobody really talks about him, and he's actually got a quarterback this year. It just kind of depends on if their offensive line is going to be less porous than SpongeBob. You've still got Hollywood Brown, who I don't think enough people are talking about him going to Kansas City. And then I think you have potentially the most disrespected QB as your QB2. And this is the point that I wanted to, this is where I was like, is this where I start? And he may be your QB1 on the scroll up for me, Jeff.
I actually think he's QB1, but
scroll up for me, Jeff. It's okay. So it's your QB1 on here on the spreadsheet. It has Williams as QB1 and then Kyler as QB2. So
I was just talking about my own rankings. I've got Kyler ahead of Caleb. So
yeah. So Kyler to me is being completely disrespected. When he's healthy, he's been a top 10 quarterback and no less. He hasn't been healthy for the past 2 seasons. There's a part of me that's like, okay, last year, was it just kind of, they knew as a whole the team was going to be bad, so let's hold him out, get him a little bit healthy. And then when he got back in, he was still great. Like, he was still really, really good from a points per game perspective. I really like Kyler Murray and think that with him getting Marvin Harrison Jr., still having Trey McBride, you've got James Conner and Trey Benson in the running back room. You've got Greg Dortch, Zay Jones, and Michael Wilson as a 3rd, 4th, 5th option, whatever you want to call it at this point. Like, Kyler Murray is, and people are acting like he's dead, and it's just because he's short and likes to play Call of Duty. Like, whoop-de-doo. Like, so do I, but I can't throw the ball like Kyler Murray, and I definitely can't run like Kyler Murray. So I think Kyler is kind of being slept on. And then you've got Jordan Love as kind of that 3rd option for me, and Daniel Jones as a 4th option. So, and Will Levis as a 5th option. So you have plenty of QB depth. I think what probably, like I said, pulled me down is really just a lack of running back depth. And then after the starting lineup, a lack of wide receiver depth. Now, the one part that I probably didn't plug in enough is you have a ton of picks. And I love that about your team. But I don't think I factored it in enough when I was doing my rankings.
Yeah, so that was a big part of the reason that I have him at 3 is because they have a good amount of youth. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Rome Odunze. You mentioned Brian Thomas Jr., Keon Coleman. Quarterback is, Kyler Murray, Jordan Love. Then you have Caleb Williams. So a very good succession plan, right? You got the guys that are already established that can do it. You got guys that are kind of taking over for them. And then you have, 4 first-round picks in 2025?
3 in 25 and 2 in
25 and then 3 seconds as well.
3 seconds, 2 in 26.
So much ammunition to go make trades.
So those,
they've got the ammunition just to go buy whatever running back they want. That's the first move I would make. Because you're right, Shane. They don't have an RB1. You might even need to buy 2 running backs to really feel solid. But the truth is they don't really have many other holes.
I would go throw a 25 second at the Jerome Ford owner just to solidify that, having Chubb and Ford.
Smart. And that was a team that actually did have some good depth at running back. So yeah, maybe that's a good point. The other thing too is I'd cut Hendon Hooker. Like, what has to happen for Hooker to
put him on your taxi squad? Son of a bitch.
Is there a taxi squad?
I don't.
There is a taxi squad, yes.
Oh.
But I don't know if he's eligible anymore because he's already passed.
Some taxi squads are just 1 year, and anyway, I just feel like there's already so much depth at quarterback, and it's only a 10-team league.
Yeah, and you're not getting.
I think that's where you can get an extra spot on a running back. Like that's where you like to Shane's point, for any team that you have that lack of depth at running back, you got to figure out ways to cut the spots. Like, do you really need Cedric Tillman or Jalen Hyatt? Like, can you figure out which one of those 2 you'd want to cut? And that's, again, another running back spot.
Sometimes I would take something that I like to try as well. And I don't know. I didn't actually look to see. Oh, yeah, they do have a fab bid or a fab budget. It's try to sell the quarterback for $5 $5,
True,
you know what I
yeah.
mean, or $1. It just before you cut them, see if you can get anything for them. If someone's gonna buy them for $1, just get that one extra dollar could be the difference between you getting a player 1 week and not getting a player 1 week. So I always try before I cut anybody that has maybe potential value, see if you can get someone for fab. Buy them for fab.
But yeah, I think team limited, almost an unlimited amount of resources in terms of draft capital to go out and make these trades, and they don't even necessarily have to make a trade week one. Like you can piece together a starting lineup. You know, who do you play as the second running back if Chubb's not available? I suppose it's Dante Foreman. I think if Chubb's going to be out, okay, throw in Dante Foreman in his place and see. And then like week one will give you a good barometer of how many points do I need if I really want to compete. Like not just like compete to make the playoffs, but actually compete to win the title. And then from there, you can figure out, okay, how many picks do I need to sell to go get which players, figure out which teams are kind of maybe looking towards more picks as well. So, you know, you can make moves before the season, but, you know, if this team isn't fully constructed with like the full starters week one, I don't think it's a huge deal. There's enough time to work on these trades as the season goes on.
Absolutely. Anything you wanted to chime in real quick, Shane, before we move to the team number 3?
No, I think I really actually like that idea of going and throwing a second at the Jerome Ford owner. And then honestly, like we've mentioned a couple teams
Backfield.
Like KCat 4-1s. That's what I'm calling you because screw the other way to say it. Like he needs a quarterback. You've got 6 of them. Go find something on his roster that you like and see if you can make a trade to get one of the quarterbacks off your roster and solidify other positions.
Yeah. And actually, the real reason I rank team limited at number 3 is because they don't have a single tight end. Perfect. I love the roster construction. That theme carries through.
And it probably explains why other rosters have a ton of tight ends, because you have guys who don't roster them at all. At some point, someone's got to own them, so it might as well be me, right?
Yeah, so a third of the league basically said, "Oh, don't need him, don't want him." Yep. So no, it has nothing to do with the 6 first-round picks over the next 3 years. No, they have 0 tight ends on their roster. I love it. That's why they're number 3.
Well, yeah, Sunken Treasure has half the starting tight ends in the league. So,
all right, let's get to number 3.
Number 3.
Number 3 team ranked as high as 4, as low as 5. It is Richie Mills. Kyle, this is your squad.
This is the other like pairing to KCat. I was actually had a tough time deciding who I wanted to put 4 and who I wanted to put 5, which ultimately might have actually made an impact on these teams anyway. So ultimately I went with Richie Mills at team number 4 for me. And it's okay. You start off with CJ Stroud. That's great. You've got this elite tier quarterback, and that might be elite tier more value than it is production. So not to say you can't sell Stroud. This might actually be a perfect time to go sell Stroud. One of the things I've been talking about on the Full Press Fantasy Pod, my podcast I do outside of GoingFor2, this year, my one message to everyone in Superflex leagues is go find out what Jalen Hurts costs, because everyone is just panicking that Jason Kelsey is retired and suddenly the brotherly shove of tush push won't work, or whatever they call it. The tush push of brotherly shove. I messed that one up. I'm messing up a lot tonight. But
right, we'll forget.
From what my understanding of Kelsey is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like the scouting reports on Kelsey, everything everyone's already said about him is, man, his mobility and his speed and his ability to get to second level and make blocks on long runs, that's his best strength. Not literal strength, and not, he does the 1 yard dive pretty well at the goal line. Like, that's good. I feel like any adequate center can go in and do that part. It's the maybe Barkley won't have as many long runs as expected without Kelsey. Maybe that's something where that's hurt more by Kelsey. But to me, I still think Jalen Hurts is this like rushing touchdown machine. So to truly go after it for the title, you're probably better off having Hurts than Stroud. And the way dynasty value is right now, you might actually be able to get some, like, Analytics might be willing to add onto Hurts to get Stroud. If he truly thinks Stroud is past the analytics from last year with the deep passing, and we've saw earlier this offseason, Stroud QB1 on keep trade cuts. And you might not now. It takes the person who you're dealing with to believe that too, but at least go inquire. Otherwise, though, I mean, Stroud, great piece to build around, and you've got 2 extremes at quarterback. Now, if you sell the young one for Matthew Stafford, then you've got 3 older quarterbacks. But Bryce Young as represent the young QB, and Aaron Rodgers is the old productive guy. So you start the season with Stroud and Rodgers probably in the lineup, and if Young develops, then he can maybe hopefully by a bye week you feel confident in adding him. But having a young QB in Stroud, like to the opposite end of Shane's earlier idea, do you go by Stafford? And that gives you you really can play the matchups between Stafford and Rodgers right from the get-go. That might give more upside to the lineup. I mean, I think we're viewing this team as likely a playoff team.
Yeah.
They still have their own first though, so that could still be a piece that can be used. I mean, there's enough great wide receivers here. And again, I think it's a good mix. The one thing I noticed about this team is balance in terms of age. Like they've got young players and old players, and like good production throughout. So they've built the roster well in that you can move it in different directions. Now, again, I think good enough to compete. So when you have a team that's this good, you don't just blow it up. And okay, I'm going for the rebuild because I'm young. Like this, go for it forward, and that's why the Bryce Young for Stafford move might make a lot of sense.
Be weary also. You have 3 Detroit Lions in your starting lineup, which is a good offense to have a piece of, but it's
go
just
buy
noticed
Jared Goff instead of Stafford.
Yeah, maybe.
Or both. Go get the former Lion and the current Lion. But actually, that makes a great point. If you've already got Laporte and Amon-Ra, why not just go
and Montgomery
and Montgomery? But especially those two, because like that's where a lot of the targets are going to go. You may as well go try and buy Jared Goff. And honestly, I'd be willing to. I guess only a first and some fourths next year makes it a little tougher, but I'd be willing to throw a pick onto Young to go get Jared Goff. I've got Goff ranked higher in Dynasty. Now, this manager here for Richie Mills might not want to sell so low on Bryce Young. They may have higher aspirations for him, but it seems like Bryce Young is the move to make to sell because again, with this team ready to compete, Bryce Young might not help that much.
Yeah, I was just going to say that would be the piece if you could find someone that still believes in him. And I'm with y'all. I do still believe in Bryce Young. I think he still has. I mean, we give up on him too soon, right? He had no weapons last year. They went out and got Leggett.
He had no weapons. His offensive line was more porous than SpongeBob, and his head coach was garbage for him.
Yes, yeah, he had the trifecta of bad situations there. So I do think he has a bounce back and ends up recouping some of that value. But overall, this team, again, solid. We talked enough about Stroud, but, Amon-Ra, Tank Dell, Devontae Adams. And this team has what I call like a succession plan, right? He has a mixture of, like Kyle said, some of the older guys with the younger guys coming in to replace him as you move on. And he has not sold all his draft capital. He still has some draft capital to continue getting younger and moving some of the older pieces as they get kind of up there in age. But a very, very solid roster for sure.
I'm looking at it. Looks like they have one less roster spot than a lot of teams. So maybe that's an open roster spot. Because RB depth, like Pacheco and Jacobs, you might get and Montgomery and Henry. Actually, that's really 4 great guys. Like you might have 4 RB1s there. Certainly like 4 top 20 running backs. Beyond that, though, it gets a little like the rest of you guys.
The best shot. Sorry.
I mean, sure. Ray Davis might be if he gets most of the goal line work, but you're really hoping and guessing for the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
And you have enough early running backs that shouldn't be a problem, but you may as well add more depth and give yourself more shots. So like the one empty roster spot, go fill with a running back. Brandon Powell and John Mechie, you probably don't need them because you're like the wide receiver depth doesn't have to be too deep. You want it to be deep enough that you're going to maximize the starting spots. But honestly, again, with tight ends, like this team has 4 tight ends, and Laporte and Kelsey are great, so they're worth rostering. I'm in favor of just cutting Taysom Hill personally. Like now, I'm also coming from the scope of like I don't want to rank him this year because there's enough leagues where he's actually not tight end eligible. So if you still have the tight end eligibility, I suppose that's the leagues where it's worth rostering.
Yeah.
The leagues where he's only a quarterback, he's almost useless because when are you ever going to play in that spot? The tight end, okay, no floor, great, but again, you don't need to play a tight end. So it just seems like cut Taysom Hill, cut Brandon Powell, cut John Mechie with the empty roster spot already. That's 4 extra running back depth spots.
Yep, agreed. All right, let's get to team number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2 team was ranked number 2 by all of us. It is unanimous. It is all about TDs. And Shane, take it away.
Oh, you are so like I struggled with these two teams that we have left on where to rank them. And I think what kind of pushed you down just a little bit is that running back position. I love DeAndre Swift. We have no idea what he's going to be in Chicago. I've never been a huge Javonte Williams, but he's a screaming buy for me in Dynasty with the way he's been talked about this offseason. And then Zamir White, probably going to be the starter. Who knows? You've got Dylan Lobby to kind of back him up there, and from what I've heard, Lobby is a decent pass catcher, so you've got that potential from the Raiders running back room. Blake Corum, ugh.
Not a fan.
No, I'm not. I think he was drafted as purely an insurance piece in case Kyron gets hurt. Because Kyron ran away with that running back room last year and was great when he was healthy and playing. So I don't see Corum as more than anything than an insurance piece. And I alluded to it earlier, talking about who was it? Was it KCAT 11? No, it was Ialytics. Trading Gino with you. The other thing that bothers me or worries me about your roster is just as kind of a lack of true like depth. Like I think it was Ialytics has Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp, Josh Palmer, Christian Watson, Demario Douglas all on their bench. You don't have that luxury right now. You have I think Xavier Legette could be nice, but he's an unknown. I love Troy Franklin. I'm lazily comping him to Amon-Ra St. Brown since they both were 4th-round draft picks, but I think there's some other similarities there as well. Mike Williams hopefully is healthy in New York. You still have Hunter Renfrow on your roster, which he's probably an accountant back here in Clemson, South Carolina, so you just need to cut him. But there's like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, Ialytics has that top tier echelon of depth. You've got a bunch of guys that I think have the talent to be there, but there's a lot of question marks for them. And I think ultimately that's what caused me to want to rank you down at 2.
Yeah,
I knew Jamie was going to chime in on the Corum thing.
Swift too.
Yeah, Jamie.
No, he's not, Jamie. You're so wrong. It's not even funny.
He's a Swift hater, and he's a Kyron Williams hater for sure. But I came to the same conclusion, right, Shane? That these two teams, the number one team, number 2, were so close. It came down to the running backs. The number one team has got the running backs, whereas the number 2 team could have the running backs if everything breaks right, but more than likely does not have the running backs. Now, he smartly backed up Javonte Williams with Jaleel McLaughlin.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Zamir White and Dylan Lobb. So
Marshawn Lloyd is there.
Marshawn Lloyd is potential. That could be, he could be a good player. But it's a lot of potential and what if.
That's what worries me.
Yeah, and that's why I have him at number 2. Still head and shoulders of, over the rest of the league. These 2 top teams are, but splitting hairs between the 1 and the 2, it's the running backs that kind of hurt me with this number 2 team.
And ultimately, what it came down to was 2 positions, running back and wide receiver, because the wide receivers that are in All About TD's lineups are great. Like all 5 of those guys, fantastic. Like you want them to start every week. But then the drop off after those 5 is big. Like there's depth, there's players there. I mean, one of them is Hunter Renfrow, so you can scratch him off. But yeah, like going out and selling Geno Smith for Mike Evans might make a lot of sense. Or even Cooper Kupp, and then you end up the problem of having a lot of Rams. That's why I was thinking Mike Evans makes sense for this particular lineup.
Yeah, I love it. All right, let's get to the number 1 team.
Number one.
Number 1 team, if y'all haven't figured it out yet, is Team Meadowlands, and we rank them. All 3 of us rank them at number 1. And Kyle, go ahead and break this team down.
That doesn't happen too often where we get 1 and 2 and both unanimous kind of in that order. Like we'll usually doing these PLPs, enough of them, you'll get maybe 1 team per episode that's unanimous. It tends
usually
to
it's number 10.
Let's think. It's usually either it tends to either be the worst team or the best team, because like either of those like extreme ends tend to be the most obvious for all of us. it tends to be how I do most PLPs. I figure out those two extremes first because the middle spots are the tough places to rank, like between K-Cat and Richie Mills, between Ialytics and Diehards. Right in the middle range was where I found a lot of difficulty, like figuring out who was where. Ultimately, the top two teams are obvious to me from the start. First off, again, the reason they're both the two best teams is because they fit the roster construction perfectly. Not a single tight end. Don't even have to waste your time on the position. Because where would you put a tight end on either of these teams? Like they're so deep, especially Meadowlands. You've got potentially the QB1 in Lamar Jackson, potentially the RB1 in Christian McCaffrey. Heck, Devon Achane, if he gets take half of Mostert's touchdowns and give them all to Achane, he might be the RB1. Might have the wide receiver one in Jamar Chase. AJ Brown probably locked in to be a top 12 wide receiver once again. A few other guys that could factor in as RB1s. You might have the best QB room overall too. It's Jackson, it's Anthony Richardson, Trevor Lawrence. Ultimately, it's funny because when I first did my rankings, I actually had All About TDs at 1, and then I was kind of looking over again. It's like, man, like this team has McCaffrey and Jamar Chase and Lamar Jackson. Like All About TDs has probably it's funny, we talk about every other player. They have Patrick Mahomes, the number one player probably overall in the league. But then Meadowlands would have like the next best assets. Like Lamar to Mahomes almost cancels out. Much rather have either McCaffrey or Achane over maybe the whole running back rooms of all that. And then that 3 potential top 12 wide receivers in Chase, Wilson, Brown. Truth is, there's not much to do. They still got most of their picks as well. All About TDs was a little bit deeper at picks. A lot of seconds, all their firsts. Whereas with Meadowlands, I think they're missing a second. So maybe actually, yeah, All About TDs does have Meadowlands second. So they're missing their second in 2025. But other than that, they've got their full complement of picks. So if something goes wrong somewhere, they can kind of put out a fire. They can, you get hurt with an injury somewhere at a specific position. You've got enough pick depth to go and sell. And honestly, you've got enough player depth here too, where if a starter gets hurt, there's still some decent replacements. Like if you've got Chris Godwin on the bench, right? So if ever Godwin has to go in the lineup, that's just as good as probably anyone else. Cortland Sutton, maybe you can make that argument. Mostert as well. So there's already some earmarked potential replacements on the bench. Maybe you could use a bit more. But that could also be something you hold and save the picks until you absolutely need it. Because Meadowlands is in such a good position, it feels like they don't have to rush to make a move. They can wait until they absolutely need to make a move in order to do that. Something you do maybe closer to the playoffs when you avoid buying players now in case they get hurt. You go through the season, you see who gets hurt, and you choose not to go with those players, and then you get more information. If you're having them sell these picks, sell this first around week 10, well, you might know better what that pick's going to get you.
Yeah, so looking at this roster, so I play a lot of DraftKings DFS, and of course the structure there is quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, and 1 flex. If you were to play DraftKings and take out the salary cap, I would have a hard time building a better lineup than Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, and Devon Achane. Those are the top guys on this roster, and literally you could just handpick those guys, put them in a lineup, and it'd be the best lineup in one of those tournaments, because that's just an insane lineup. Now you still got Joe Mixon, DJ Moore.
You guys haven't talked enough about DJ Moore on this roster. Like,
I was gonna say, how many teams get to use Saquon as the RB3 as well?
Yeah, like I know DJ Moore has target competition coming in Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen and a new quarterback, but Caleb Williams is better than probably any quarterback he's played with in his entire career. Yeah. And I'm not a Caleb Williams guy. Like, I'm not in love with Caleb Williams, but he's probably the most talented player that DJ Moore's played with.
My pushback to that is I don't think rookie Caleb Williams is going to be as good as third-year Justin Fields was, especially after the injury. He was actually playing great. And guess what? DJ Moore finally had his first wide receiver 1 season. Guess who it was with? It was because of Justin Fields.
Yeah.
So I think he does take a step back, but ultimately, eventually, Caleb will be the best quarterback he's played. I just don't think that happens right away.
In year one.
Fields was actually pretty great last year.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention Anthony Richardson, who, a lot of people are starting to peg as the next, QB1 overall.
If he stays healthy, he's QB1 overall.
Yeah,
I said it on Drinking and Talking Fantasy with Jake Trowbridge. If he stays healthy, he can finish QB1 easy.
He's like Allen and Hurts, is that he has that high weekly upside that's like as high as those two essentially. In my touchdown projections that I've done, I do have Richardson tied with Hurts for the league lead of rushing touchdowns among quarterbacks. And not as many passing touchdowns to necessarily keep up and be ranked among with these other guys, but yeah, I certainly agree that he has that ultimate upside. You've got two quarterbacks with that ultimate upside. Could be some low floor performances is the one worry, but I guess Trevor Lawrence is there for bye week insurance or injury insurance, which you might need, but yeah, bye weeks.
Yeah, it's a pretty insane roster. It's a beautiful roster there at Meadowlands. I can't remember where we had you ranked last year, but I do remember you being pretty close to the top. It would be hard to not be at the top with the guys that you have there. All right, fellas, that wraps up the PLP. First one we've done in a while. Now we've got a bunch back to back coming up, but I want to thank both of you for coming on as usual. Hope the league enjoyed the breakdown. Obviously, this is, I believe, your second year, if it's not your third year, but definitely the second year for sure. Appreciate making you the purchase. And just going to go around the room, guys. Give me your Twitter handle and anything you wanted to plug. We'll go to you first, Shane.
Of course you will. I was trying to look up the spreadsheet from last year. Follow me on Twitter, X, Elon Musk Funhouse, whatever you want to call it, at FFShaneB. And follow the tournament and podcast account at Polly's Playoff. Polly's Playoff registrations are still open. Some of the prizes you can win are an entrance into SFB 15, a Football Guys subscription, and like we mentioned earlier in the show, a personal league podcast. So sign up at pollysplayoff.com, and minimum donation is $1. So we'll see you in there.
Polly's Playoff. Do not sign up for Polly's Pocket. That's a totally different tournament. What you got?
So I'm at Sumner Says on Twitter, or Elon Musk's Funhouse. That's a fun way to say that. So I've got a couple shows on GoingFor2 Live, as Jeff mentioned earlier, the 2-point conversion, press coverage, in no particular order. I guess in no particular order, we'll be back next week. And we took a week off. It happened to be on a Thursday. Last Thursday was July 4th. So I think it'll be basically like almost a full month since the last episode. But, next Thursday, July 18th. We are drafting athletes we would like to have a beer / smoke a joint / consume any type of hallucinogenic substances with. So that'll be a lot of fun. I'm sure there'll be a ton of different answers, like Gladys, myself, and Shannon, and any other guests we have coming on.
Yeah, that show's always a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
In no particular order, but they do it in a particular order, which is kind of ironic in that sense.
We have to draft show names eventually, but yes, I've got the a couple shows outside of GoingFor2 as well. Full Press Fantasy Pod, Full Press Packers Pod. Packers one is just Green Bay Packers stuff. Although it's fun, we actually did a really fun episode just dropped a couple days ago. My co-host Jesse and I, we basically realigned NFL divisions. We reformatted them in certain ways. I've got 2 different versions I created. Jesse had one where he completely changed everything. Like, hey, only 4 divisions total. We're gonna have set 8 teams per division. We're gonna only play your division opponent once. Like how the schedule would work too. And yeah, we just had a lot of fun. Like changing the NFL. It's our little play thing. Like we're billionaires, but we're not.
I love it.
Full Press Fantasy Pod. We're kind of in the middle of 2 important series. I find target share projections and then touchdown projections. So at least the 2 AFC episodes for the target share projections. We go through every team, almost every single pass catcher. Talk about what I think their target shares are going to be based on previous year's data. So the couple of NFC episodes should be dropping later this week, early next week, and then eventually the touchdown projections will be there. So again, at Sumner Says, at FPC_Fantasy Pod. And just want to say thank you to the Any Given Sunday podcast for once again purchasing the PLP. And thanks, Jeff, for inviting us on. I always love doing these with Shane as well. I know he was excited to join me. I'm just excited to join you, Shane.
Thanks, Kyle.
Love all around to everybody. I love it. Thank you both for coming on the podcast. Thank you all again for purchasing the PLP. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. You can catch the Armchair Fantasy Show Wednesday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are in the middle of our division previews. We actually call them I Hate Division Previews because
Division previews.
I see you pointing at yourself, Shay. I'm going to get to it. Don't worry. I'm going to plug you. I hate division previews because as a content consumer, I always hated division previews. So we try to find a fun way to do it. We do it in a mock draft format where you are doing a division. We can only draft players from that division, which makes it very interesting when you get to the second round and you're drafting guys that are just not the greatest fantasy players. But if you're a dynasty guy, you probably know some of those names. And this Wednesday coming up, as Shane alluded to with his pointing to himself, he is actually going to be on the show. We are doing the NFC and the AFC South. So we'll be drafting for both of those divisions. Very stark contrast in those divisions. You might have maybe
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot of fun doing those two divisions. But so for Kyle, for Shane, I am Jeff, and we hope to see y'all next year.